Now I want to be your dog.
I knew you were going to start with a quote, Karen. I was like, what's he going to go with? Is it going to be, I am an anarchist? Is he going to do Sex Pistols? No, he's doing Stooges.
I feel like we have to do this. I feel like we have to do this chronologically. Like we got to start in the U.S. and then go to the U.K. and then come back to the U.S.
I'm game, man. I'm game. Happy Record Store Day, everybody!
Oh hell yes!
Is it Rex Manning Day? It's Rex Manning Day.
It is Rex Manning Day, my dude. Say no more, Mona Moore.
Wow.
Yeah.
A blast from the past.
Which is pretty much our topic tonight.
Absolutely, yeah.
It is the past, and that's kind of the overarching question I want to get to. Is punk actually dead? It's been declared dead so many times. Is it though? We don't have to answer this right now. We can come back to this. We can come back.
We can. We probably will in our roundabout obtuse way.
Facts.
Very true. Very true. I mean, hopefully we'll even get a chance to touch upon the DC punk scene, which
we kind of have to. Yeah,
we kind of have to.
Have to.
And I remember coming up in that scene because my best friend was a punk guitarist. Eventually, we formed a band, and that was well after punk with grunge had started. But like he was already like listening to punk albums and playing along to them when he was like 13, and we didn't form a band until like we were like he was like 23. So like 10 years later, he already had 10 years in a guitar playing, but he had started listening to Bad Brains and Gray Matter and Black Flag.
Black Flag. Oh yeah. All right, so there's a couple of different ways we could do this. Mike says we should go like chronologically.
Well, I think like we got to start early. Like we got to talk about the early days with like New York Dolls and like Iggy and the Stooges,
proto-punk.
The Ramones actually were like one of the earliest bands, and like all of that basically got shipped across the pond to
England,
and
to the working class,
and they took it around.
Yeah, I think that's good. I think that's a good way of going about it because if we trace it back to the roots, we can define the concept. We can say what punk is and then discuss if it's actually dead or not. Because if you really want to go all the way back, you gotta go to the first music that was called punk, and that was mid-'60s garage rock.
Yep.
Like stuff like the Sonics.
Yep.
And the Sonics just put a new album out like 2 or 3 years ago. Like they're old. They're old. They're so old, but they put a new album out. and then they made a big splash in like LA.
So I have actually, this is a question, and I'm wondering if you two can answer it. So like you both know like the band T-Rex, right?
Yeah.
Yeah, so Mark Bolan.
Yeah, so like would you consider that like proto-punk? Because I mean that was like the early 70s, right? Or am I placing them wrong? Or is that the late 70s?
No, you're not wrong. They're early 70s. Mark Bolan went on tour with the Damned right before he died, like post T-Rex.
Yeah, the Damned is definitely like a...
Yeah.
Okay.
I don't know, man. Magic Carpet Ride isn't real punk.
No, but I mean...
That's what we have to define. The holy quaternity of proto-punk are Velvet Underground...
Yep.
MC5, Stooges, and the New York Dolls. I was watching the Runaways movie a couple of weeks ago, and I had this thought pop into my head, and because a few years ago, this band from Detroit, Death, got discovered after their tapes were sitting in somebody's attic. It was the 4 black guys from Detroit, and they had this. They recorded this music and nothing happened with it, and then the tapes were rediscovered and it became this huge thing because they sound they're punk AF and they sound great. And watching the Runaways movie, which I didn't finish, but I seen it once already, and it's like that whole aesthetic was just kind of lying around in the early to mid 70s, and I think that if the Ramones and the Sex Pistols and the Clash and the Damned and the Buzzcocks, if they didn't get started with it, then somebody else would have.
Yeah.
Because
oh yeah, absolutely.
You know, if you look at garage rock, it's like the most basic, simple, loud, amplified rock that you can play.
Sure.
I mean,
and it all
Cherry Bomb is a very punk song.
Yes, it is. So
Cherry
like
Bomb is a very punk song.
People don't think of the Runaways as being punk, but they're the grandmothers of every all those wonderful girl punk bands from the 90s that we came up on.
One like
Sleater Kinney and L7 and Bikini Kill.
And like earlier, like in the early days, you had female fronted bands like the Vice Squad, like X-Ray Specs.
X-Ray Specs, yeah.
Amazing.
Yeah. Or the Pretenders.
Yeah, the Pretenders, yeah. Blondie, honestly, yeah. So, but
yeah,
I think it's a very vaguely defined concept, what is and is not punk. Because you can like in the late 60s there was a lot of what was called heavy rock. You know, amplification technology reached a certain point in the late 60s so that rock became very loud and very heavy. And the Doors took advantage of that. And that's where Led Zeppelin and Jimi Hendrix and Black Sabbath.
Yeah, I was going to say Black Sabbath. That was sort of the birth of metal as well.
Yeah, exactly. And Black Sabbath is considered metal, and the Stooges are considered punk. But if you listen to early Sabbath and the Stooges, like, there's not a whole lot of daylight between them.
No, and the weird thing to me is like people didn't know what to make of the Stooges, but like people like kind of got the idea pretty quickly with Sabbath.
Yeah,
like there wasn't a lot of resistance, but like some of the early recordings with like the Stooges, like you can hear bottles breaking and people screaming because they don't know what they're watching and they like have feelings about it.
Yeah, Metallic KO.
Yeah,
one of the last live recordings of the Stooges. Yeah, people were throwing bottles at him. That's because Iggy Pop like pissed off a biker band, and they came for him at his concert because Whereas you're right there, Mike. Black Sabbath came along, and I think they had a whole lot of like industry support. And for some reason, they were working a dynamic that was edgy, but still people could understand.
Yeah.
Whereas the Stooges are very, very weird.
And Black Sabbath was right on the fringe of being psychedelic rock as well.
That's true. That's what they started as.
I mean, do you ever listen to Fairies Wear Boots? My old band did a lot of Black Sabbath, an awful lot of Black Sabbath covers.
Sure.
Yeah, they were.
I used to be able to play Iron Man, War Pigs, the whole night. And that's looping back on War Pigs. War Pigs is a very political song, and
absolutely,
politics is an element of punk.
Oh yeah,
that is
separable.
In defining punk, that is definitely not all punk songs are necessarily political, but
so I was thinking about this earlier today, and I was like, I feel like punk rock is first about pushing the social envelope, which will inherently have political consequences, right? But I do feel like there's a like a humanist focus. Very much like it's about the people or like certain groups, and then affecting like sort of sometimes directly, but there's a political element. But I do feel like it's rooted in like a social critique first. Yeah,
it's rooted in a lot of being angry, and young, and in a sense to what's going on around you.
Well, and so like I felt like the early American proto-punk was very like anti-establishment for sure, but it was like kind of like the other end of the Cultural Revolution, or like the hippie like it's kind of like well maybe love didn't really work, y'all, like maybe we're kind of pissed off,
but maybe a boot to the head might.
But then like across the pond, like in the UK, that was like the mid 70s, and like they had like 10% unemployment, and like there were just a bunch of like young people that were like really pissed off because like this whole like middle class lifestyle, having a job that they were basically sold as what they were going to get was not what they had.
No.
So they were like, fuck this, I'm going to put on like my fucking underwear and like shave my head and like start around in the street and, scream and like,
Yeah, it was definitely a response to conditions. And I think in when I look at those proto-punk bands, the MC5, they were political. Like they were very much on the cusp of the whole like late 60s political revolutionary thing. When I look at Velvet Underground, I don't see that.
No.
Or New York Dolls, I don't see that. To me, it's always been like the edge pushing to punk has always been aesthetic. And social commentary follows from that. You are trying to be as edgy as you possibly can be, and it's sound and look. And then
that's
commentary follows from there.
But that's usually been the music industry anyway, is sound and look. I mean,
exactly.
Modern times, it's almost look before sound in many cases because you can auto-tune the crap out of things.
Oh, sure.
That's a conversation for another time.
Well, but the Velvet Underground was very good at having themes, to the actual, the albums. Like that's like we talk about concept albums, but like this was a band that like really did, like they did amazing work. So
I
mean, finally read.
They were not part of, but connected to the whole Warhol scene.
Yeah.
They were like his house band for a minute.
Yeah, they were his house band for a minute. I don't think it was something that Andy Warhol was particularly cared about a whole lot or conscious of. It was like I'm sorry. At that point, the factory had become an institution, and somebody in the factory said, "Hey, this band is kind of like doing an aesthetic that fits our art, so let's connect these two things." And Andy Warhol was probably like, "Okay, cool," and Lou Reed was probably, "Okay, cool. Hey, let's put this German singer in there." Why? Because.
No, I definitely agree. And you got the Ramones, who are considered punk, but they didn't.
They're considered canonically the first punk band, the Ramones.
Yeah.
And they weren't. I mean, Ramones sound great. I like them. Not so much on necessarily social or political commentary.
No.
Blitzkrieg Bop is not. I mean, what?
No.
I mean,
sometimes they had political content when Joey Ramone could get the lyrics through, and Johnny didn't feel like beating him up over it.
Well, and it was yeah. It was also like they ultimately wanted to be a pop band. They were trying to just go. They were actually going about it in kind of a roundabout way. But they seriously always just wanted to be like a pop band. And
definitely. They had an idea of what they wanted to be, and they just wanted to be a rock and roll band. And I think when you're looking at first generation punk, Ramones, Sex Pistols, Clash, the whole DIY underground concept wasn't what they wanted to do. They wanted you want to sign to a record label, you want to sell a bunch of records, you want to be rock stars. They all wanted to do that. And to a certain degree, they all did. None of them cracked the top of the record charts, but the Ramones always did okay. Like, they made a living.
Oh, yeah.
I mean, they did a song for Pet Sematary called Pet Cemetery.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
They have a massive body of work. They were always putting out albums.
They churned out albums. They never sold, they never got a gold record until something they put out and made gold in Brazil.
Yeah,
I don't know.
The late 80s, and that was their first gold record. But they always sold enough to keep going, and they toured constantly, and that's how they made their money.
There's maybe one of them alive now. I think just one of them.
Yeah, he actually hosts a show every 2 weeks on Sirius XM, and I listen to it on my way back from class on Tuesdays. Yeah,
cool.
The Ramones are the anti-Spinal Tap. Only the drummers are alive.
Yeah, it's Marky Ramone and it's
and CJ. CJ.
And CJ. Yep.
Yeah.
Now, where do you feel the Misfits fall in on this?
Oh, yes.
They're I don't know. They're more like they're later on though. They're like horror punk. They're like a grid band. I feel like they're almost
Misfits are second generation.
Yeah.
They're one of those bands that popped up in the wake of the Ramones. Hey, these guys are doing this. We can do this too. And that was a lot of the your Black Flag, Misfits. Yeah. A whole bunch of them classic American punk and hardcore, but Descendants.
The Descendants were later though.
So historically, what we're looking at is punk started in America, went overseas, and then came back.
Basically, yeah. I mean,
and it had a whole different development in the UK as opposed to the US.
It did, but I felt like since so much of the Brit stuff was I don't know. It had like this whole raw intensity, but it kind of focused the sort of some of the concepts or some of the like elements of rebellion or like youth against like the establishment. And it sent it back across the water in the in the 70s. And I mean, we had the energy crisis. It was the height of the Cold War. Unemployment, was pretty high over here as well. Things were not great.
Disco was happening.
Yeah. Disco will piss you off, so you're gonna want to like shave your head and make a mohawk, put on some combat boots.
Actually, disco might have been dead by then, but
disco was disco won.
Oh yeah,
until it fell apart. Like it was punk and disco in the 70s, and disco won because disco sold a whole mess of records and punk didn't.
And I'm guessing that disco is just a lot easier to do coke too than punk, or safer.
Yeah,
safer.
Yeah. Disco kind of like
more predictable.
Disco was like a seed for other music that came along later.
Yeah,
those first generation punk bands, like they didn't survive and sell the records that the way they wanted to sell them.
No.
And when the Sex Pistols like broke up because they had been declared the flag bearers, then the industry kind of just walked away from it. And after a while, like, the Ramones had a following and they were able to make a living. But if you look at like the other bands of the CBGB scene, like Television and Richard Hell and
Blondie.
Blondie was more pop and they made a career. Like the Dead Boys. None of those guys did anything. Like by 1981, they were done. And so there was no industry support for them. And so that's when it all went underground. That's when hardcore happened. Right. And hardcore was DIY, hardcore. That's when it all became codified. You had to have the mohawk, and you had to have the black leather jacket, and you had to have all the
Doc Martens.
You had to have the Doc Martens, and it became a tribe. Because that's how it continued to live. Because you need those tribal markers. And then it rolled through the 80s underground and then exploded up again in the early 90s.
Well, and I think that so many of the punk scenes had their own... We were talking about politics, but I also think that so many punk movements and like subgenres had their own like political landscapes within. Where it's like, oh, you've got to be like this kind of person that shows up at the show, and you got to make sure that you're like clearly expressing the like this, that, and the other thing. Like I've been to some of those shows like when I was younger. So like,
it's very like it's very like it's very fixed.
Yeah, it's very prescribed. Like don't like there's certain things that you should definitely not wear to some of those shows, and there's other things that you absolutely should wear, and it's kind of it's very like rigid.
Yeah, and that was necessary so the tribe could survive, but at the same time it was very like limiting. And we were talking about the DC scene, and what we're describing now perfectly encapsulated how the DC scene worked. It was very weird in like the late and early 70s, 30 Seconds Over DC, just a bunch of strangeness. And then hardcore happened, Minor Threat.
Yep.
Songs that lasted.
Bad Brains was later, but they were there.
No, Bad Brains was the same time.
Is it the same time? Okay.
Yeah, same time. Bad Brains started around the same time.
Fugazi was there at the same time.
Well, yeah, I mean, Fugazi came along like late 80s.
Okay,
Fugazi was later because Fugazi is like half the guys in Minor Threat and half the guys in some other band.
That's right.
Yeah.
I always forget that.
Yeah.
The crossover from Minor Threat. Yeah, all right.
Yeah, and then it was all this like 90 seconds of noise, and that was a very like strong scene until everyone got like tired of it, and that's when post-hardcore started happening in the mid 80s. Rites of Spring being the most famous post-hardcore band, which if you listen to them today, they sound like Nirvana, which is to say Nirvana sounds like them.
Right. And then you have other bands later on that were like the sort of the indie darlings, like the Pixies. But when I listen to the Pixies, like I'm just like, this is punk rock.
It is. It totally is. And I think during the 80s, the early 80s, everything was very rigid. And then after that, things got relaxed and more creative so that Sonic Youth could do its thing and the Pixies could do their thing. And we we could throw in other elements and it would be fine. And the replacements could grow from being very rigidly punk into we can have other kinds of songs as well. We don't have to do the same thing. And that's what led it being embraced by the music industry in the late 80s and early 90s.
And the 90s saw the whole opening up of the alternative genre, which, I mean, hell, we had a station out here that was their deal.
Yeah.
For a long 98, 99.1.
HFS.
HF Festival, man. HFS, yeah.
Yep.
And, like, they would throw the massive HF Festival concerts.
Moment of silence for HFS, man.
Yeah, fuck yeah.
Yeah, man.
Moment of silence.
Yeah.
Yep. Pour one out. Pour one out for HFS. We hardly knew ye.
And which, funny enough, when I was a dishwasher in my early 20s, that's what would be playing in the back in the kitchen.
Yeah.
I'd be washing dishes to HFS. A lot of college radio, but I was in college, so that kind of made sense.
College radio, is that even a thing anymore?
Actually, yeah. TMD in Baltimore.
Yeah.
And they're like the pro level radio station out of Towson University.
Okay.
89.7. They're amazing. They're like they're one of the like few college radio stations left that has like the broadcasting license, but they're extremely professional. They're like a gold standard. They get held up as an example for how to do it for like nationally.
Yeah. I mean, Towson is not a small university.
No.
I mean, it's got good
it's
funding.
the second largest in the state. Yeah.
Wow.
No, it's a great station. They do.
Yeah,
they do like all kinds of shows. They'll have like reggae hours. They'll have like the Dirty Soul Party, where it's just like 4 hours of like actual legit soul music. They'll go back for like stuff from like the 40s and 50s.
That sounds amazing.
Yeah, they're like all over the place. They're definitely people that love music.
That's the kind of music state radio station I've always wanted to listen to. All right, so let me ask a secondary question here, a personal question. What got you started? What was the punk band that made you want to listen to this? Or was that introduced you to it?
Wow, yeah, that's a good question.
Because I'll be that guy, and I'll admit that for me it was Green Day.
Okay.
It was Green Day. Dookie came out in 1993. I was 17. I love that. I love that album. I still love that album.
That was a great album.
And unironically, I still have the same tape that I bought when I was 17.
I think
I can still play it somewhere. Yeah, I can still play it.
I could play some stuff, all that stuff. Let's see. So it would have been 86 and I would have been 13, hanging out in my best friend's basement. And like, he's the one that introduced me to all the punk, but he was like introducing me to DC underground punk. So we're talking Bad Brains, Gray Matter. I don't know if the Milkmen were putting the stuff out yet.
In 86 they totally were. Yeah.
86. That was like their first year. Yeah.
Yeah.
Also, the stuff off of Joan Jett's album before the I Love Rock and Roll that had Bad Reputation on it had come out. And Joan Jett used to hang out with Sid Vicious and Nancy. Like, she was hanging with them.
Joan Jett hung out with everybody. She was in the Runaways. I think that album was called Bad Reputation. And that was like 81.
She does not care. Joan Jett does not
she was like from Wheaton, Maryland, or she lived in Wheaton, Maryland for a while. She went to high school there.
Good for her.
Yeah, I had no idea. Before she ended up out on the West Coast doing the Runaways. But yeah, so that's the stuff I was listening to that got me introduced into punk.
Nice.
I only discovered Iggy Pop later. Like, I discovered him later. I just got the Sex Pistols were kind of tangential to me. I wasn't really that. The Clash I heard because the Clash was on the radio.
Yeah, so, that's always been the difference. The Clash will occasionally show up on the radio.
Like, I've heard "Should I Stay or Should I Go" 1.5 billion damn times.
Yeah, it's a great track. Yeah,
it's okay. It's not my favorite Clash song, but it's okay.
No,
Where
much better
where does
Clash song.
Okay, so where does the Butthole Surfers sit on all this?
They're technically speed metal.
That fits.
Yeah,
that fits.
Okay, I was just curious.
Also, like the singer, I forget his name for Butthole Surfers. He was actually part of Ministry, and also Pig. Like he's the guy that sang "Jesus Built My Hot Rod" in Ministry. Yeah, that's the same guy.
Yeah,
they're Ministry's industrial.
Ministry's industrial.
Yeah, but it's not. It's not. What I'm saying is, it's not all. Yeah, but I'm saying, tangent. It's not all Al Jorgensen. He's not the only one that sings on some of the tracks. Some of them's actually the guy from the Butthole Surfers.
Okay.
A ring a dang ding, a ring a dong.
Like Psalm 69, for example, that like he's singing on most of those tracks. But
yeah.
Back to punk rock. Yeah, for me, I think it was. So I was familiar with like the Clash, but I'd heard them on the radio, so I'm not going to count them.
Okay.
From like childhood. I think like the first music I really got into that was kind of punky was actually like it was like both Pearl Jam and Nirvana. And I got into them, and then like I had a friend of mine that was extremely knowledgeable about punk rock, and he was like, "Hey man, you should really be listening to this stuff." And like he exposed me to, like, I kind of already knew who the Ramones were, so I'd listened to them a bit, but then he like played me some Misfits. He actually had both the Sex Pistols albums, so we sat down, we listened to them.
Yeah.
And and I just kind of started like going through the genre.
That's kind of what I did. Yeah. That's kind of what I did. Like I knew Green Day, I liked Green Day, and then I think you remember My So-Called Life.
Yeah,
remember that?
I recall that.
Do you remember that show? Like on that first episode, dude saying "I Want to Be Sedated" by the Ramones, and I was like, "Wait, I've heard this song. I know that is the Ramones. I want to explore more of this." And I just kind of Amazon.com had kind of just become a thing, and you could buy music on Amazon. So I kind of just like went down the list, like, okay, Ramones, check. Sex Pistols, check. Velvet. What? Then I discovered this book called Please Kill Me, which was the oral story of the CBGB scene, and that's how I discovered Velvet Underground, New York Dolls, and the Stooges, and all that crazy insanity. And that's how that was my journey in.
A shout out to, actually, there was a band that I liked before I got into punk rock, and I didn't know that they started out as punk rock. And I still love them to this day, and that is the Beastie Boys.
Yes.
They did start out as punk.
They started out as a punk band, and they were like...
Pollywog Stew!
Yeah, and they were like into rap, and they were like, man, though, like, we don't want to get shot. And they were like, okay, so what we're going to do is just dress in the most ridiculous way possible, so they just think that we're clowns, and they'll, like, laugh at us, but we won't get shot. And it totally worked.
Have you seen the Beastie Boys movie that was on Apple Plus? Have you seen that?
Oh God, no, I have not seen that yet. I do.
No. I got Apple Plus now because it came with my.
I heard it was good.
It's really good. It's just the two surviving members, and they talk about everything. They relate the whole history of what they did and how they did it. And it's the big takeaway I had from it is that post License to Ill, they got hosed.
Yeah,
like the classic record label, record industry hose job was what was done to the Beastie Boys. Like Def Jam hosed them hard, and then they had to like totally re-scramble and almost rebrand, which was great for them. But yeah, the Beastie Boys are legends, and License to Ill is still kind of great in terms of like just that pure attitude, that aesthetic edge, which is what we were talking about. Even though it was rap rock, even though it was that, like
No Sleep Till Brooklyn, man.
Right? It's
got
the
Monkey.
It's got the edge. It's got the attitude.
Fight for Your Right to Party.
These are all bangers.
These are all bangers.
Like Paul Revere. Yeah. Like everything on all Beastie Boys albums are great, except To the Five Boroughs. That is terrible.
I don't think I ever heard that one.
It's terrible.
Check Your Head is a favorite of mine. Yeah.
I love Check Your Head. That Check Your Head and Ill Communications are the best two. Like
Ill Communications
is fantastic. But yeah, this is kind of like it was a journey. Is the theme of what we're saying here. Like we discovered things, and that leads to the discovery of other things, and you kind of made your own way, and you were introduced to things. Like I had a friend in California's like 1990, 1991, who made me a tape of the last Pixies album, Trompe Le Monde.
Trompe Le Monde, yeah.
Trompe Le Monde, like I had it on tape, and this was before I'd ever like even heard Nirvana, but I used to like wash the dishes with that on my Walkman, just listening to Trompe Le Monde. He also put Blood Sugar Sex Magic on the other side of the tape, which I have never cared about.
Album.
I've never cared about the Red Hot Chili Peppers.
Early Chili Peppers, like Real Men Don't Kill Coyotes, that specific song.
Yeah.
Very, very in kind of.
They're mild. They're definitely like they have the same edge to them, especially their early stuff, the Chili Peppers. So it's like it was never something that I was like, ew, I hate this. It was more like just like, eh.
I mean, Under the Bridge is kind of their version of a power ballad, but I mean, you know.
I mean, you can't fault them for doing a power ballad. That's what sold.
It's
No. I can fault them all day long for doing a goddamn power ballad, all right? I can friggin' fault Kiss for doing a power ballad. I can fault Kiss for a lot of things.
You can fault Kiss for being Kiss, and
I can.
Yeah, that's you don't even grade them. That's a whole other topic.
Strangely, they got a few bangers too, but that's indeed another topic.
Yeah,
is that ever? But I think an apt description for what punk is kind of like when someone tried to describe, pornography. Like, I can't describe for you what pornography is, but I know it when I see it. I can't really describe for you what punk is, but I know it when I hear it.
Yeah. And I think for me, it's always been the bleeding edge of rock and roll.
Yeah.
The bleeding edge of rock and roll. Like, I describe it sometimes as like an antibody that exists within the musical framework, and it kind of goes away for a little while, and then when it's needed, it comes back to clear out the noise, and then it goes away for a while because it's basic. It's incredibly basic, and you can only listen to it for so long before you want to like expand upon it, and that leads, once you do that,
It's like the ginger when you go to get sushi. It's meant for cleaning the palate.
Yes. I agree. It's for cleaning the palate. Because I think it's not an accident that when you look at the aesthetic that the first generation of punk adopted, it was in its way derivative.
Mm-hmm. Sure.
It was there. The music was like trying to bring back the magic of the 3-chord song of 50s rock and roll, and they kind of adopted an aesthetic that was pulled from that. I mean, those black leather jackets weren't there for no reason.
Sure.
That was in the jeans and the t-shirts. It was
very
all
greaser.
It was very greaser. Yes, there's an Eddie Cochran vibe running through early proto-punk and early punk, and I think that's a good thing.
Oh, even some what do you call it? Mr. Walk the Line.
Johnny Cash.
Johnny Cash, yeah.
Yes.
Was not punk, but was very influential on like the early punks. He
had the attitude.
He had the attitude.
Yeah, that whole Sun Records scene. You know, there were no punks that didn't like Elvis. You know,
early on,
early Elvis.
I mean, look at Billy Idol. Like Billy Idol still tries to does do his best sneer.
Yeah,
like Elvis. I mean, it's still a thing that he does in concert.
And he should, because he's good at it.
Anytime I see footage of him doing a show, no matter when it was, he is always giving it 120%. And I look at the crowd, and if they're not having a good time, I'm just like, well, those people just didn't know what they were in for, because Billy is fucking killing it. And these guys are just like, meh. And I'm like, no, you need to get up and jump around. This man is putting on a really good show.
Billy Idol came out of that scene as well. Generation X was his band.
X, yep.
Yeah. I mean, hell, you want to talk about someone who puts on a really good show? Alice Cooper still puts on a really damn good. And Alice Cooper is ancient at this point.
He is. He is decrepit.
I did good for him. Going back to Billy Idol real quick. So on the alternating weeks, he has his own show on Sirius XM on Tuesdays.
Oh, cool.
So alternating evenings, it's on one week it's what do you call it, Billy Idol, and then the following one it's Marky Ramone.
Do we have new sponsors I don't know about?
I'm just saying it's actually really good. I've heard a bunch of like obscure shit that I've not heard like since I was like in a basement when I was like 17. So
I mean, I'm going to be honest. My to me, the mark of a radio station that I will listen to is they'll play Pepper every once in a while, and that is a radio station that will then get programmed into my because if I can reliably hear Pepper,
it's a great song.
A couple times a year, I'm a happy man.
It's a great song.
Yeah. It was a decent album. Electric Larryland had a couple of other decent tracks on it, but their earlier albums were better song for song, I think.
Yeah.
Like Who's Been in My Bed is still a banger. But
that's on the other album. But yeah, that's also a banger and we're talking about the Butthole Surfers again.
Yeah.
In case anyone
Which is a pretty punk name, if nothing else.
It really is. I mean, that's the other part of the edge. It's like, how ridiculous a name can we come up with?
Oh, I know that one well.
Yeah, I mean, the Sex Pistols. That's a ridiculous name.
Oh, yeah.
That doesn't make sense. And it doesn't have to. That's the whole point. It's nonsense. The character that I always thought, I mean, Iggy Pop is called the godfather of punk, but who I always called, going back to the 50s, who I always called the grandfather of punk was Little Richard.
Oh, yeah, absolutely, yeah.
Little Richard, because it's the same nonsense. Like Tutti Frutti, those are nonsense lyrics.
It's very Dada.
Yeah, it's Dada. It's ridiculous. They don't mean anything. Nothing means anything. Like, and it's all his songs are edgy, and it's the bleeding edge of rock and roll.
Yeah,
you know, they're all bangers. They're all bam, and so I think it's just a current of rock that like can exist, and so I think that kind of answers our question about.
Yeah, I don't think punk didn't die. It just took a nap.
Yeah,
it's nappy.
It can always come back when it needs to.
Yeah,
it came back in the 80s and 90s when it needed to, and then it kind of showed up again in the early 2000s, albeit repackaged. You know, but if you listen to the Strokes, they're just doing they're doing a television thing.
Yep.
You know, the White Stripes are like every punk blues garage noise from the early to late 90s, bands that you probably haven't heard of, but were crazy underground, kind of like got expressed in that.
Yep.
And there's the Hives.
Yeah.
Who I've never stopped loving.
The Hives have kept going, like, yeah, they've been around. No, and I mean, like, I think that you can still find, like, little basement punk rock shows to go to. Like, there are still punk bands that are still, like, new and putting out music now. It's just that, like, I think that the scene has kind of gone back to how it was or how it has been at various times. Or it's extremely local, right?
Yeah.
You know?
Because it's basic. It's three chords and an I don't care attitude.
It's also like I find so much of the punk like these days is so like fractured. It's gotten so very specific. It's kind of like the metal scene.
Yeah.
You know where it's like, oh well, I'm gonna go and see this shoegaze band, and it's like, you know, and you're like, oh, just shoegaze, eh?
Like define shoegaze.
Right. Or it's like, or this is doom, you know, strictly doom metal, or you know, yeah, it's like, and it has very specific, you know. But you know, it's just I think that all of that has happened with the punk music as well. It's gotten.
We're definitely gonna have to do a metal episode. I'm just gonna say that right now.
We can talk about metal. I like metal. I didn't used to like metal.
Crossover band Slayer.
Yeah.
Oh man, when we finally do that episode, I have a story from back in my days. It's cleanish.
Ish. Okay.
My band was called the Lords of Urine, dude. Clean-ish.
Oh, dude, wow. That's like something out of a movie. That's amazing.
That's also entirely my fault. I was it was my 21st birthday, and I was really, really drunk when I named our band that had no name at the time. I can't remember. Mike, did you ever get to hear us live practice in the basement? I know you were around when we were around, but
towards the tail end of you guys still having the band, like I think I was around one time when you had practice, but I wasn't there. Like,
okay, yeah,
like, think I either had like work or I had to go to school or something. But like, you guys did get a practice in. I remember we hung out like a day or two later, and you were telling me about it. I was like, well, let me know if you guys are going to play, and then it like never materialized again.
Yeah, no, drama happened. What happens in all bands of men in their 20s.
Creative differences.
Oh no, it was a girl, dude. It was a girl.
Yeah, I know.
It was definitely.
I was
a girl.
giving you the benefit of the
creative
doubt.
Differences.
No, do not give that. It was definitely a girl,
Yeah.
my girlfriend at the time, in fact. But
it's okay, dude.
Yeah, no. That's a long time ago, dude. I feel no injury from that. I'm more mad about losing the band than her.
Yeah, that's fair.
The band was
kind of I never got to listen to you guys play.
Yeah.
There's tapes somewhere.
Find them.
Yeah. Oh, I wouldn't have them, and I'd have to get a hold of John. That'd be real hard.
All right.
At this point.
All right. Well.
But.
I mean, you're married to his cousin. It might not be so weird now.
True. My wife was punk when I met her, actually. I think she's actually the one that got me in the Misfits. But I know when I met her, she had a blue mohawk. So
Mohawks.
And that was like 21 years ago or so.
Yeah, it's a while ago.
That was another thing that came in the underground scene. Like, it started appearing. That was actually a result of Taxi Driver.
Yeah.
Taxi Driver, that movie came out, and that's when they kind of jumped on that. Like, if you went to like CBGB's in like 1977, you'd wonder who let all the hippies in. You know, it was very long hair. Like, the Ramones never had mohawks. Their hair was crazy long. They were that cut codified later on, and the mohawk itself was just the reason he wears that in Taxi Driver is because that was a paratrooper thing during World War II. It was a paratrooper.
Okay.
You know, the original hairstyle does come from the Iroquois, the Mohawk Indians. But it was something that was later adopted by paratroopers during World War II. Just because it's a warrior's haircut. You know, that's why they did it. And it was just like the little strip that you see in Taxi Driver.
Yeah.
But because the character in Taxi Driver is a Marine, he kind of went there as his character became more insane. And it was a marker that people in the 70s would have understood, you know, if they, you know, had a dad or an uncle or somebody who was a paratrooper in World War II and had mohawk haircuts. That was just like a known thing. And then it became theatrical and blue.
Or green, or pink, or yellow.
Whatever.
Or
Liberty basically using Kool-Aid.
Yeah, Kool-Aid.
Yeah.
Kool-Aid and
there was
glue.
no manic panic.
Yeah.
No. Yeah, and some glue to like get it to stay for more than like a day.
Yeah, Kool-Aid and glue. That was the secret of the Mohawk. And
some Knox gelatin.
And it's funny that you mentioned the glue because when my wife was trying to figure out how to spike up her hair, like this year actually, because she went to a short haircut from a mohawk, and she's like, "How do I get this to spike up? Do I need to use glue?" I'm like, "There's this shit called hair gel, baby. Tell me you've heard of it." She's like, I'm like, "Okay, let me show you the stuff you use to make your hair do the stuff without having to use the Elmer's."
Yeah,
because
that's funny. That's funny. I used to like just get like hair spray because I was never interested in permanence when I was into this in like the late 90s. I would just like get some like very hard hairspray in a variety of colors, and like I'd spray this, and then I'd spray this, and I'd get like 4 spikes going, and I would go to parties like that. Just
like I had a neon mohawk that we threw together with some poster paint. Just poster painted up into the neon, and stuck in place, and it lasted for like one real use, and then I washed it.
Yeah, I would wash it out the next day, and it would be then I'd be normal again.
Yeah, like I just used to go and hang out, but like I helped friends with mine with their hair. Like I helped a buddy of mine like put his Liberty spikes up.
I mean, I looked goddamn ridiculous with a mohawk, so that's just why I just like I look completely fucking ridiculous.
Like,
and
I mean, it doesn't work for everybody. Like some people can rock it, some people can't.
Some people, it's a real edge look and they can pull it off. Some people like, I look like a doofus.
Yeah. I eventually went away from that. It just wasn't a sustainable look, and I didn't care about getting like deep into the scene. I just wanted to listen to the music. So what I'm saying is I'm a giant poser, is what I'm saying.
No,
I'm a giant poser, and that's fine. I accept that.
I mean, you like what you like. You like the style that you like. You experimented with it when you're there.
But yeah, I think the other thing we wanted to talk about a very specific band when we wanted to talk about this, and we've kind of mentioned it once or twice, and I think it's because it's the band of the sound, and that is the Stooges.
Yeah.
Yep.
Yeah, because I've been rolling them in my car on repeat for the last week with this in mind, and
hopefully some Seek and Destroy found its way.
Oh yeah, I've got all 3 albums rolling through the 3 canonical albums. I don't count Weirdness or Ready to Die. They are. I don't think I even listened to Ready to Die because the Weirdness was just. It just wasn't there. There was nothing wrong with it. It was just uninteresting, and there was no greater curse for a Stooges album than to be uninteresting. Like I would rather it had been bad. If it had been bad, I would have liked it better than if it had just been like, eh. It sounds like an Iggy Pop album, but the Ashton brothers are playing on it. Okay.
Yeah.
So they were from what? Detroit?
Yeah, Ann Arbor. Ann Arbor, Michigan,
Arbor.
but Detroit was the rock and roll scene in the late 60s, and they were I'm of the opinion that there's a mix of them in every punk band that's ever existed. Like that vibe carries through because they like if you take the sound of the Stooges and you mix it with the Beach Boys, you have the Ramones.
Yeah,
yeah,
to a certain extent, yeah.
If you take the Stooges and you mix it with like Deep Purple, you have the Sex Pistols.
Yeah.
Yeah. Listen to Highway Star and then listen to Nevermind the Bollocks. It's revelatory. And Steve Jones has copped to this.
Oh yeah, no, well sure. And like Steve Jones was he was like the band member that had the broadest taste, like out of the Sex Pistols, like far and away. Like he had actually been a musician previous to like being in the Sex Pistols.
Yeah.
Which you could not necessarily say about many of the Sex Pistols being a musician, even in it being in a band.
I'm going to say this in their defense. I think they were all better musicians than they're given credit for.
Oh, yeah.
Like, they actually put the time in and practiced and learned what they were doing before they started playing.
No.
I think Steve Jones is a pretty underrated guitarist. Paul Cook is nothing. He's nothing like amazing. He's basically Charlie Watts, but that's fine. Matlock is the guy who had big broad tastes, the bass player, and I think they were all better. And I think the Bollocks album holds up better than it's usually given credit for because it sounds a lot like a mid-70s hard rock album, which is kind of what they knew, and it just had that kind of edge to it. So I think I tend to defend them as musicians because they sound very tight, especially when you listen to the album. Like Sid Vicious couldn't play, but he was stoned, and that's fine. He's not even on the album.
But they also had some, like, they had good producers, and it's like you said, they did actually try to improve as they went.
Yeah.
And, like, they had the support and the resources. Like, that was something that...
They had 3 different record contracts.
And I love that they were like, the whole point was to make money.
Yeah, the whole point was to make money. They weren't trying to, like, they wanted to make art, but they also wanted to make money making art. Like, that was the vibe. That was the whole idea.
And I loved that, like, that was a thing for a lot of, like, British bands, particularly the UK, like the Sex Pistols, but then, like, pretty much every band after them in the UK at that time was like, we would also like to get paid.
We would also like to be paid, please. If you could...
There are 3 great motivators to being in a band: money, booze, and girls.
Yeah, that's pretty much why you trying to be a rock star, so you can have unlimited access to those things.
I wasn't concerned about money, but those other 2,
yeah,
really more girls than the booze. But the booze was a nice side benefit because I got a lot of free beer out of that.
Yeah, that's you're dead on there, Kieran. That's why you want to be. That's what a rock star is. A rock star is somebody who has all of those things constantly.
which sadly tends to be highly self-destructive.
Well,
but...
yeah, unlimited anything will doesn't matter how good it is. Unlimited anything will kill you if you let it.
So let's talk a little bit about the timeline for Iggy and the Stooges.
Yes,
and like how that maybe parallels also David Bowie at the time.
Yes, that's a connection that has to be made. Stooges started in the late 60s. They were part of that whole heavy rock vibe that I was talking about. They were called the little brother band of the MC5 for a little while.
I did not know that.
Yeah, they knew each other.
I learned something.
They hung out with the MC5.
Okay.
And the Stooges would open for the MC5 because the MC5 was doing very well for itself as a local regional band. They didn't have a record label. They didn't have a record deal yet, but they were a big deal. And they were the MC5 kind of defies categorization. They're very heavy.
That's fair.
They're almost metal. They're almost punk. They're psychedelic as well. They're all of the things, and they're very loud and like that whole black leather jacket, jeans look, like that was Fred Sonic Smith, one of the guitarists of the MC5. Like somebody said that when they first saw the Ramones, like, oh, they're just like clones of Sonic Smith. Cool. I don't know who said that, but and then the MC5 and the Stooges got signed to Elektra Records on the same day by somebody who worked for Elektra Records, and went out and see them, saw both shows, and be like, okay, it was this is it. This is all in Please Kill Me. Dude was like, okay, this one band, MC5, they're great, they're ready, they're rock and roll, they're selling out all over the Midwest. Like, and there's this other crazy weird band called the Stooges that are like their little brothers, and can we get them both? I was like, all right, give 25,000 to the big band and 5,000 to the little band. Will you take 25,000? Will you take 5? They're like, and that's how they got signed. And the MC5 did 3 or 4 albums, and then kind of got sucked under by the economics. And the other thing that sucked under all these bands, which was drugs.
Oh yeah, and alcohol.
Yeah, that's the other thing that has to be talked of. Heroin.
Oh yeah,
is always present at the destruction of all these bands from this era. Unfortunately,
I mean, Lust for Life, pretty much about doing heroin.
Yeah,
well, that was afterwards. That was when him and Bowie had gone.
Yeah,
to
Bowie produced that album.
Yeah, he also plays on at least 2 of the tracks.
Yeah,
but that was when they were both trying to kick. They had both recently quit.
Yeah,
and like they were played on each, like Bowie, I forget which album of his parallels that one, but like I believe Iggy like played some instruments or did backing vocals or something on.
Yeah, David Bowie produced 4 albums in 1977, 2 of his own and 2 of Iggy Pop's. Yeah, his albums were Low and Heroes, and the Iggy Pop's albums were The Idiot and Lust for Life.
Right.
And he did all of those came out in 1977. So that was kind of like their
Idiot was the same year.
Yeah, same year. Like The Idiot came out in like February and Lust for Life came out in November, and that was like what was going on. And that was kind of low. Those were kind of like big game changers for both of them. Like The Idiot was Iggy Pop's first real album since the Stooges had broken up. So he hadn't done anything in like several years, except hang out with David Bowie. And
and do heroin.
Right. As one does. And
as one does.
And Bowie was kind of moving away from his glam thing, that Ziggy Stardust era stuff, and Station to Station, and then which came out in 76, and then Low and Heroes were kind of like his shift away into a different whole vibe in his career.
Yeah, Staring at the Berlin Wall is how David Bowie came up with Heroes.
Yeah. Yeah. Sex Pistols had a song about that as well. I think that was the opener. Holidays in the Sun is all about them looking over the Berlin Wall at East Berlin, being like, I don't know how to feel about this. What is this?
Yeah.
What is this reality? That bifurcated world that no longer exists.
But it's like the Berlin Wall stood for like a really long time.
Yeah. Yeah, like at least 35 years it was there.
Very long time.
Never that
longer. Yeah.
Yeah, I think it went up in 61 and then it came down in 89. So almost 40 years.
Almost 40 years, yeah.
And sadly, not a big enough chunk fell on David Hasselhoff. But,
well,
hey, he's big in Germany. He's big in Germany.
So are other things that I shall not mention. But we know what I'm talking about.
I'm going to surmise, there are several things that you could be talking about, and I'm just going to
make the worst assumption possible. You're probably right.
That was what I was going with.
I thought it was just a weird German thing these guys did. Yeah.
Now's the time on Sprockets wenn wir dance.
Just to briefly segue here, one band that I just remembered we did not mention at all that also fits in there, Dead Kennedys.
Yeah. Oh, yeah. We haven't talked a whole lot about that whole California scene. The LA scene.
Yeah, very different too. And that's, yeah.
The LA scene, Black Flag, and the Circle Jerks, and
later on you get what do you call it? Bad Religion.
Bad Religion, yes, and
later on.
And we can definitely circle back to
the Offspring.
The Offspring, yes, the Offspring
are definitely California punk.
Yes,
yeah. No self-esteem, and She Has Issues. I remember those two particularly well.
The Offspring was great at coming up with that one incredibly catchy song every album that was irresistible. Yes. They're kind of like the Talking Heads that way, although in a completely different way.
Though Pretty Fly for a White Guy was also really good fuel for comedy.
They were a very comedic band. Offspring was like they
still are. They just put out an album.
Did they? Good for them.
No kidding.
They just released one.
Idea.
Good for them. Awesome. Good for them. It's probably very similar to what they've been doing, unlike Green Day.
The lead singer decided to finish up his PhD, I think, in molecular biology or something.
Good for him.
Science, something.
Good for him.
An amazing amount of scientists in the music scene.
Yeah, it's kind of weird.
Yeah. Yeah, I think it's because both music and science are about putting things together and rearranging things. I don't know. It may work similar parts of the brain.
So would that mean punk is closer to mad science, which is all application and no ethics?
Yes. Yeah. I really have no idea what you're talking about, but I'm going to smile and nod.
Well, see, you have normal science, and then you have mad science. Mad science is practiced by mad scientists, a la Victor Frankenstein. So...
This sounds more goth than punk right now, dude.
Mad science is all application and no ethics.
Okay.
Whereas normal science is theoretics and some ethics.
Okay, I get what you're saying. Go ahead, Mike.
I can put this in philosophical terms.
God.
It's kind of like Diogenism, or just like Diogenes' philosophy.
Right, Diogenes, yes.
This is Diogenes' philosophy in musical form is punk rock.
Yes.
Like, that's how I think about it.
That makes complete sense.
Yeah, Diogenes is punk as fuck.
Yeah. Yes, you may have to wash your own vegetables.
You may have to.
That dog may pee on you. It's going to happen. Just accept it. Move on.
Yeah.
Wait, that's not a dog? That's a filthy old Greek philosopher. Oh, God.
Do you have any enemies nearby? Yes. Go put the dog urine on your enemies. You're right. An opportunity. Later on, the Romans were like, man, I don't know. Like, carpe diem? Yeah, I don't know. Just wipe your trouser. Just wipe your toga on that guy.
That guy, yeah. No, I think that's right. It's the guy who doesn't want to hear it and doesn't want to be told it, and is gonna undermine the things that you hold dear. That's kind of the vibe here, and it's vital when there's a whole lot of can't.
Yeah.
To be absorbed, and that's when it becomes like. They didn't really hate Pink Floyd, but Pink Floyd had become so obligatory. So that saying, or putting on the back of a shirt or a back of a jacket, I hate Pink Floyd, was a bold statement.
Right.
You didn't really mean it. I mean, There's nothing wrong with Pink Floyd. I got a whole mess of Pink Floyd albums. Pink Floyd's amazing.
Punk is nothing if not reactionary and just in your face and raw.
Yes.
Very, very raw. What can I say to piss this person off? I'm going to say it.
I would prefer not to. I decline to participate.
Well, and that's why I wanted to sort of talk about like how all of these different bands sort of belong to different sort of like historical eras.
Mm-hmm.
You know, like some of them are still around, but like you can definitely like pinpoint the heyday for like some of the older bands.
Yeah.
And that was like, you know, when they were front and center and like really on the ball, like for whatever was happening, like socially or like in the punk rock community.
Yeah.
You know, for whatever scene they were in, like.
Yeah. Historically speaking, they all came up due to certain circumstances that were in the era. There was an opportunity. Somebody heard a sound that was missing and jumped on it.
When it's like popular, it's basically like a smaller version of popular music. Like it's definitely like you have like the bands within the subculture that are like more popular and more like on the money, and people are like, oh yeah, the Sex Pistols, oh yeah, the Ramones, or you know like, and it's you know whoever's sort of the band of the moment kind of a thing.
Sure.
So.
Sure. And then you got these niche bands that no one's ever fucking heard of.
And there's a lot of that.
Yeah.
There's a lot of
that.
I
mean, I was at record store day at our local record store in town.
Yeah, and I saw some of what you found in the chat. Like, but tell us some more. Like, what were some of the other things you saw?
Oh, well, there was an Echo and the Bunnymen, and I thought of you, Mike, when I saw it. I was like, it's a live Echo and the Bunnymen album. I almost got it, but I didn't.
They're actually great in concert. I saw them.
Yeah, it was a live. I'm pretty sure you can still find it. What I bought was the Wipers had a reissue.
Oh shit!
Yeah, I almost got that too. I ended up getting Wasted Youth, which was again like L.A. hardcore, 1981, the sound of 1981 in the L.A. punk scene. Very, very hardcore
band in that era was fantastic.
Yeah, L.A. hardcore.
Great music from that era.
X is great.
Yes, X is. Yeah, I feel like X is underappreciated.
X is underappreciated. X is really good. Los Angeles, Under the Big Black Sun, like they had kind of their own unique sound.
Yeah, no, they were great though. I loved X.
No, X was great, and Black Flag obviously went through a number of phases, both pre and post Henry Rollins.
That's very true. You guys remember that movie, The Fall of Western Civilization?
You know, I never actually saw that.
Oh, dude, seminal punk movie. Oh, historically so. Speaking about music, there was a sequel. I never saw it, but The Fall of Western Civilization predominantly focuses on punk and new wave music coming out at the time.
Yeah,
I mean,
the first one. Then there was like a metal version of that, and there were
metal one that they did.
I mean, I think the Cramps were in the first one.
The Cramps.
I love the Cramps.
The Cramps is
they're technically called Psychobilly.
They're Psychobilly.
Yeah. But how many Psychobilly bands are there? There's the Cramps. There's the Reverend Horton Heat, like Mojo Nixon, and then who else?
A couple I can't think of. I mean, like the Misfits really kind of skirt that a little bit because they definitely got a lot of that 50s sound going on, and definitely the horror.
Johnny Grave and the Tombstones, but he's a local.
I love that. I love that name.
He's local to that now though. Like he's in DC now. But yeah, he's not from that era.
And I think a lot of these things all fit together and like do cross current because like. Yeah, what difference really is there between punk and psychobilly? A slight more country flavor, just a little bit more Johnny Cash in there, a little bit more Johnny Cash, a little more Johnny Cash,
sure. A little more zombie Johnny Cash.
Yes, and
dude, that's my Misfits cover band, Zombie Johnny Cash.
It does sound like a good Misfits cover band. And then there's like goth. Which when goth began, I know goth went into a bunch of different phases, and you guys can talk way more about goth than I can. But if you're talking about early goth, you're talking about Joy Division and The Damned.
Susie and the Banshees.
Susie and the Banshees.
And, like, that's to me, like Susie and the Banshees is also another crossover band because they were much more punk rock towards the beginning, and then eventually like they kind of branched out and developed their own style, which was much more like goth rock.
Yeah, and goth totally came out of people that came out of the punk scene. that went dark. And
yes.
that's also funny enough something you can find in the 60s garage bands that were first called punk, like the Count 5, Sonic Psychotic Reaction. Like they wore Dracula capes, and that was just another. Like I think all these things mixed together nicely.
That's a cat.
The other album I bought was Black Sabbath, Heaven and Hell.
Oh, nice.
Which Heaven is my first Ronnie James Dio Sabbath album. I've been very, very strictly Ozzy Osbourne Sabbath, so I've never gone into Dio. But when I listen to Black Sabbath, and I think I said this already, but when I listen to Black Sabbath and I listen to the Stooges, like it's all that same kind of like loose, crazy, high energy, heavy, dark kind of a vibe.
Oh yeah,
and I listened to like Ron Ashton beat his wah pedal on the first Stooges album, and it sounds a lot like what you get in early Sabbath. I think it's a little looser, a little less structured. I think Sabbath was always like very structured in how they wrote their songs, and the first Stooges album is very loose, like 3 chords.
They're almost like some of the Stooges stuff is almost experimental.
It is
like the literal sound is verges on experimental.
It
like,
is
some of it actually is, but yeah,
it's just like how little writing can we get away with this and make a song out of it.
It's very true. Another hallmark I really think of punk is you don't necessarily get the more vocally talented singers in it. Like there are some good punk singers, but by in general, like Johnny Rotten, not a terribly talented singer. I mean, he could sing, but not terribly.
I don't think
talented.
He could sing. I just think he had good diction, so his lyrics were clear. He's basically screaming into the mic.
Yeah.
Usually, if you're a punk vocalist, it's about the energy you're putting out, not so much how good of a singer you are. Like HR from Bad Brains, tremendous energy. Henry Rollins, tremendous energy. Iggy Pop, tremendous energy.
That was the selling point of the Stooges, was like this madman running around the stage.
Yeah. Well, and he belted out the tunes the whole freaking time. And like it was always like 110%. Yeah, no, he was like always up there. No, I mean, like I feel that way about like Jello Biafra and like
Dead Kennedys. Yeah.
Dead Kennedys, like it, like he apparently still really brings it, but like for me, like I can't listen to a whole Dead Kennedys album anymore. I can only do like 3 or 4 tracks with Uncle Jello, and then I'm like, all right, I got to listen to something else now.
I mean, I can get through Holiday in Cambodia and a couple of other things.
That whole Fresh Fruit album is so
that whole album is so good.
Their cover of Viva Las Vegas is really, 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 really good.
Yes, it is.
Don't get me wrong.
That is a great cover of that song. But you're right about vocalists. It's a totally different vocal style. It's not about making something pleasant to listen to. It's about expressing something.
Which is probably why Susie and the Banshees didn't work quite as well as a punk band, because Susie has a tremendous ethereal voice.
Yeah.
That just lends itself to a more harmonic, kind of less guttural kind of thing going down.
Well, I mean, but then you had I forget her name, the chick that fronted the X-Ray Specs, who had actually started having like opera training before she started doing the punk rock singing. I can't remember. She's unfortunately passed on.
I mean, Joan Jett had a very guttural voice as well.
Polyester, something.
Polystyrene.
Yeah.
Oh shit, we forgot about Wendy O. Williams.
Oh shit, you're right. We did.
We don't have to talk about Wendy O. Williams. We don't have to do that. All right, fine. I'm sorry. Go ahead.
I mean, she did a cover with Lemmy of Motorhead of "Stand by Your Man." I mean,
Motorhead is another area where it's metal, but it's also got a like that whole speed metal vibe had some punk to it.
Yeah, there's definitely some crossover there. Like Faith No More, for that matter.
Faith No More.
I know. Yeah, that's true. I know very few people that enjoy punk that also do not enjoy Motorhead.
Yeah,
like that's
you
can
absolutely
like. I know a lot of people that like punk and they also like Motorhead. I like both.
Motorhead's great. It's that whole speed metal thing. Even some early like things that are considered metal, like some early Metallica or even early Motley Crue, has a kind of loud, fast thrash that, even though it's not, you wouldn't call it punk, it borrows something of that aesthetic of like,
yeah, it pulls from that energy.
Yeah, that energy.
We mentioned the Chili Peppers earlier. Like the Chili Peppers had albums out in like the early
That's true. They did.
You know, and it was very punky.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, their stuff was initially very punk.
So it's funny you mentioned vocalists, and I think sometimes a refusal to be clear can sometimes do a disservice, especially if you're actually writing interesting lyrics, and that always makes me think of the Germs.
Yes,
because
yes,
that guy, what is his name?
Not Pat Smear.
No, not Pat Smear.
Was in that
Pat
band.
Smear was the guitarist
in that band. Yeah,
he went by Bobby Pin, and then
I think it was Bobby Pin.
Yeah, it's that guy, but it's not.
Yeah, I know who you're talking about. No.
Why don't I remember his name?
Hold on.
I'm really irritated now. This is bothering me.
I know who you're talking about.
You know who I'm talking about. But he was like, if you take the time to read the lyrics to Germ songs, they're legitimately poetic. They're clever. They're interesting to read. But he is
Darby Crash.
Darby
Crash. Yep.
I'm so irritated with myself for forgetting that. But yeah, Darby Crash. Darby Crash was like the closest thing to a straight up poet that scene produced, and he was also from the LA scene.
Yeah,
he was one of the early. That was one of the earliest bands of the LA scene. Was the Germs, and they were terrible when they. That was not a band that started practicing and then tried to make music. They just started like you listen to the early stuff, and it's awful. It's awful, but the lyrics are really good. But his vocal performance is so terrible that you never know it. And that to me,
a lot of these guys didn't have great like equipment either.
No, that's true. That's true. But he if some diction would have been wonderful. If he had just a little bit of Johnny Rotten's diction, people would remember Germ songs a lot more than I think they do, and that to me is sad.
It's interesting to me because we mentioned like the grunge in like the late 80s and early 90s, and that was a feature of a lot of like the alternative music from the late 80s early 90s. Just like muttered lyrics, and like some of it was actually like real poetry. You could not understand what they were actually saying. Yeah. Like you needed the liner notes.
I still don't know what Smells Like Teen Spirit is about.
Oh, but it's just a collection of catchphrases.
It's just a collection of catchphrases. Like, and it's Little Richard. It's Tutti Frutti. There's no sense to it. It's just just throw words together and then let the mind coagulate about it. Like
like a Rob Zombie song.
Like a Rob Zombie salad. It's word salad.
Yeah.
A mulatto, a mosquito, my libido. What does any of that mean? It doesn't.
It's rhyming and also using like what do you call it? Assonance.
Yeah.
So yeah,
assonance. It's just words that's come together and your brain forms it into a thing. And Nirvana was great for that. Just like here's a bunch of concepts. We're gonna let your brain mix it together. Although I think on their third album, they were definitely communicating from a different place and definitely said like teenage angst has paid off well. Now I'm bored and old.
Yeah. Doesn't actually get more punk rock than that.
That is the most.
He's like 26, 27 when he's saying that.
Now I'm bored and old. That is the most punk rock thing, especially standing on the cover of Rolling Stone with the T-shirt that says "Corporate rock bands still suck." But what I think was even more punk rock was the second time they were on Rolling Stone. They wore business suits.
Yeah,
that was to me the real subversion, because they were subverting what they were actually doing. It's like, yep, we've totally sold out. Sorry.
And they had one of the best. They still have had one of the best like MTV Unplugged sessions, and
they invented that whole thing. Yeah.
Yeah, I mean, and part of what was so great about it was they were like, oh no, we actually put a bunch of thought into how we're going to do this. Like, you're not just going to show up and hear Unplugged Teen Spirit because we're not doing that.
No, I think a lot of people took them a lot more seriously after that Unplugged session. Like people who otherwise didn't hear it, like heard that, and they're playing like Bowie songs.
Mm-hmm. And they had the Meat Puppets playing with them as well, and they did a couple of Meat Puppets.
They did a couple of Meat Puppet songs, and Lead Belly.
Yeah, Lead Belly.
Yeah,
they did Lead Belly.
MTV Unplugged help a lot of bands to get taken more seriously. Like, for Christ's sake, they made Kiss get taken more seriously because they did Unplugged.
Well, there was
yeah.
Speaking of like, there was goth bands. Concrete Blonde actually did one. And I didn't get to see it, but I heard some of the tracks off of it.
Mm-hmm.
That was actually
Concrete Blonde counts as a goth band, really?
Yeah, I mean they're like.
Bloodletting is a very vampire-ish song, but
kind of considered like, I don't know, like they were always sort of like a punky or like goth band. Like,
I think their song was Still in Hollywood.
Yeah,
that was definitely more on the punk side, if anything else.
They had another one that they was basically about police brutality and like the LAPD.
Mm-hmm.
They do like I've got the album with that on it.
Yeah.
So like
like Bloodletting is like their one big one that ever got played in the goth club. But I mean, I wouldn't.
Well, I kind of feel like they're a grid band. That's like they're another grid band to me, but like
a crossover.
Yeah, like a crossover.
Like a lot of stuff crosses over because the music itself is just a modality of expression.
Right.
So you can do whatever you want with it, which is why it lends itself so well to like what you were talking about, Mike, with like the sub-fractionalization. Like, we were going to have cowpunk, and we're going to have psychobilly, and we're going to have gothcore, and we're going to have metalcore, and
rockabilly. Like, rockabilly was huge for a minute.
Yeah,
that was a thing.
Yeah,
so, yeah.
Yeah, the neo rockabilly revival in like the early '80s with the Stray Cats.
Yep.
The Stray Cats are still great.
The other bands.
I still love Brian Setzer.
Yeah.
Oh yeah, yeah.
He did after he was done with his big band, he put an album out like 10 years ago called the 68 Comeback Special. And it is
I didn't know about that.
It's almost psychobilly. Some of the tracks on there. It's really good. Brian Setzer, I think the band is called 68 Comeback Special.
Okay.
But it's just pure rockabilly, and there's a very like, it's a nice edge to it. It's a very alternative edge to the rockabilly, so it sounds really, really good. I've always been a Brian Setzer fan. Anybody who plays a Gretsch that big, I'm on board. I'm ready for that.
Hell yes.
And anyone that's got a band that has a bass player, has an upright bass that he's practically riding to play. No, he's legitimately riding the motherfucker to play.
Yeah,
I was impressed.
That's like Bill Black did for Elvis back in the day.
That is some high energy bass playing.
Yeah.
Right there.
Yeah, and I think we were talking about Reverend Horton Heat, like that guy usually plays a stand-up bass.
That's an endurance challenge there.
It is. And again, it's the simplest form of music structurally, but it's about what you put into it that makes it, you can do all kinds of flavors with it. It's
absolutely,
which is why I think that it's always kind of there, and it can like arise at any time, and it's just kind of lying around, and if somebody picks it up and dusts it off, you can have fun with it.
Yep. But I think like Kieran said, yeah, it is sort of in some ways like inherently reactive. So there's sort of, it doesn't happen in a vacuum.
Sure.
Like it doesn't happen in a void. There's got to be like some kind of stimulus to like, get it to surface. Right?
There has to be something really boring that inspires this reaction. Like, we're looking at the mid 70s, like rock and roll had gotten very ornate.
Yeah.
And very, like an album is like one album, the side of an album is one track. And,
or you would just get pop music in the 70s that wouldn't really even rock. Like, bullshit ass Captain and Tennille nonsense. And,
like that stuff always exists. That stuff always exists because, it's just nice sounding music, and that's fine. But
nice sounding music is boring. But nice sounding music happens all the time.
Yeah, people like good tunes. And
not to get up on my old man soapbox, but here's the soapbox.
Do it.
I hear what's on the radio, which passes for pop nowadays, and every once in a while I will hear something that sounds okay. I'm like, all right, that's a banger. But for the most part, I remember the stuff from my youth when I was a teenager. I'm like, the shit I listened to was hardcore. This is some like soft ass bullshit right here.
Right, and I think that happens to every generation. Like, I think this got published recently. Like your musical taste pretty much forms in your early teens and doesn't deviate a whole lot.
Nope.
Which makes me happy because it means, all right, I may be an old fart, but at least my music could like take modern music out around the back in the alley and rob it.
Right. And everybody says that. Everybody says like, no, this was real music back in the day. And that's eventually what the kids today will be saying. I tell my students all the time, like, I used to be with it, then they changed what it was. Now what I'm with isn't it anymore. And what is it seems weird and scary to me. It will happen to you.
I don't know about scary, but definitely plain and boring.
Right. And if you're listening to a pop music station, it's supposed to be inoffensive. Yeah. It's supposed to be pleasant, and it's Taylor Swift, and it's friendly, and it's it sounds grand.
Don't get me wrong, it's some catchy bullshit, but
I mean that kind of music's always existed and always will. Yep. And there's nothing wrong with it if you just don't like it. And I'm with you on that. Like I don't like that either. Like I spent most of the 80s as a child being like, huh? One of my earliest memories is early watching like MTV in 1984, and all these old farts are talking about Return to Waterloo like it's a big deal. It's a Kinks album. It's a Kinks album, and I'm 8 years old. What are the Kinks? I'm 8 years old, and what is this? And like that whole Michael Jackson, Madonna era that I could not relate to in any way.
The very first
years later, there's hair metal
music video I ever saw, and it may have been on MTV or it may have been on the late night video channel, but the very first music video I ever saw was Twisted Sister's "We're Not Gonna Take It."
we were actually watching, Tessa and I were watching music videos the other night, and that actually came on.
Yeah.
And like she'd never seen it, and she like completely freaked out. It was amazing.
Yeah, that was that got played a lot. I saw that a lot of times.
That whole like monologue that he has at the beginning where he's like screaming about like
your life.
He's like, I carried an M16 through Vietnam.
And it's the guy from Animal House.
Yeah.
It's the guy from Animal House. Yeah,
but I think we just are all lucky to have had our musical tastes formed when our music had more of an edge,
Right, and I think the edge nowadays is not found in rock and roll. It's found in other things, and I think
yes, absolutely. Yes.
Circumstances being what they are, different tastes have taken over. So, that being the case, I think the idea of the high energy and the high edge can be made, but it will be expressed in different ways. I don't know.
And I think when you were talking about punk being cyclical, I think that's what that is. You have these periods of times of soft, inoffensive, like easy listening, I dare say, even music. It's catching, and then punk comes right back up because, we need something raw. We need something with energy. We need something with once again with feeling.
Something that feels like a risk. You were mentioning the Beastie Boys earlier, Mike. That was the first band that I heard of that grown-ups didn't want us to listen to. Like we were having we were gonna have like a 5th grade social or 5th grade dance at my elementary school, and one kid was like, "Can we listen to the Beastie Boys?" The teacher was like, "No, we are not." No, I was like, What is this? What is this Beastie Boys of which you speak? I've never heard of
it even more.
Yeah, I didn't listen to the Beastie Boys for a while.
Oh my God, Mildred! They referred to porno mags in their song. Oh, that's just terrible, isn't it?
Yeah.
We also used to we would listen to early rap, like Public Enemy and
Run DMC,
like very early very old school stuff.
Yeah,
and NWA, Eazy-E, all of that stuff.
Yeah, I've made some study of that whole kind of style of music, and I've never been able to fully get into it just because I always felt like it wasn't really for me. Like it spoke from a culture that I wasn't part of, and I didn't feel like glomming onto it and pretending that I was part of it. I didn't really want to be that another one of those white kids who pretended they were a gangster in 1992 when The Chronic came out, like half the kids in my neighborhood did. Like, we live in the suburbs. Who are you trying to fool?
I just enjoyed listening to it by myself, like in my home, not driving around in a car, not trying to be a hard ass. I was just like, I enjoyed this music.
Yeah.
Well, I lived in during my childhood. I largely lived in Section 8 housing, so that was my environment coming up for the most part.
Right, that's a different reality.
And that's a different reality. And you know, there are very few music forms that I do not enjoy. But like most types of music, I enjoy.
There's no genre of music that's without merit.
Yeah,
and
I'll listen to classical every once in a while, very infrequently, because while it's very soothing, it also does put me to sleep. Not because it's boring, but just because it's very soothing.
Yeah.
I find string sections to be very soothing.
They are very soothing.
You know, I listen to different things depending on where I'm trying to go with my day or my mood or what I need. And
yeah, I do the same thing. Yeah, I do the same thing. I'm trying to like, where do I need to be right now? What do I feel like? And there's a bunch of things that I can grab. Like if I need to work and concentrate on things, I may pull out some Eno or something that's it's going to go on for a long time. It's going to like sound in the background and I can like kind of ignore it. Maybe some Kraftwerk.
About 2 years ago, that would have been some Ghost for me when I was at work. I was listening to some Ghost on heavy repeat and some Metalocalypse, definitely Metalocalypse albums as well, because apparently those types of music, when I'm sitting, admittedly drives people around me nuts because my feet are going along with the drums.
Yeah.
So I had to learn to curb that when I was at work. But like, yeah, I'd have my headphones on and I'm sitting there doing design and I'm just like, you know, just different driving forces. And we have really veered off topic.
It's fine because we're kind of, I think that what we were getting to is like all of this, all forms of music are kind of cross-stitched with other things. Like you can't really, punk doesn't exist in any kind of a vacuum. It was trying to recreate something, and then it led to other things that were different to it, but also laid the seeds for a bunch of other things and existed in certain social conditions and expressed certain aesthetic realities or aesthetic ideas, which is really what all music is about. Is like how can I speak this feeling? And
I mean, very evocative.
Yeah, very much so, very much so. And like I said, it comes down to the energy. And you know, some people might say, "Oh, well, Green Day is not punk." I'm like, Green Day is Green Day, and I'm going to say, no. When I was listening to it in the '90s, it certainly sounded like punk to me.
Yeah, they were great. Yeah. Dookie's great. All those albums up to and including Nimrod were great. It's when they got.
I have Nimrod somewhere.
Yeah, it's when they did the whole American Idiot phase that I tuned out.
I listened to a lot more like NoFX that was contemporary with what Green Day was doing at the time. The same was also true for like Operation Ivy. Like Op Ivy is still like, you know.
Oh, you mean Rancid?
They were fun like back in the day, but like yeah.
Didn't Operation Ivy become Rancid though?
I think there were like people that played in both. I don't remember.
Yeah, okay, I don't remember.
And there was like Screeching Weasel was another like subset from like
Screeching Weasel.
So honestly, Rancid was kind of ska punk.
Yeah, they have a ska vibe to them.
They're very ska punk.
It was like the only band that Tim Armstrong sang in. I think he like mostly just played guitar in the other bands he was in. I don't remember.
Yeah. Ska's a whole other universe.
That's a different ball of wax.
I used to roadie for a ska band.
Good for you. That's great.
I've had a diverse career. What can I say?
Yeah, I mean, again, no genre is without merit. I think the other thing about that made punk fun was that you could just do it. Like there was like no threshold to cross. Like you didn't have to be good.
No, you do not have to be good to be in a punk band.
You know 3 chords. You can play. just do it.
Can you reliably play them not exactly sober?
Yeah.
All right, there you go.
Yeah.
It's the whole stripped down aesthetic, right?
Exactly, stripped down, nothing else. You can just have fun with it, and which is why I think that kind of started with the Stooges, because they kind of did that whole stripped down thing. Like the Velvet Underground had a very ornate thing, and all those guys were legit instruments. Like Sterling Morrison was like legit a solid guitarist, and so was Lou Reed. And Mo Tucker was playing something very like primitive, but she knows how to play the drums. And MC5 were like very like, they knew what they were doing. They were highly charged, but the Stooges were like, we're going to just make everything as basic as it needs to be. It's going to be 2 chords, and I'm going to stomp all over my wah pedal.
And like you said, that was an era, like that was sort of the beginning of like when bands, like that was before like the mid 70s and the late 70s, where like regular rock and roll had just gotten very ornate and kind of like top heavy. And it's like back at the genesis of that, like Iggy and the Stooges were already sort of moving in the opposite direction, like you said. And that was like, they're moving against the current, basically.
And that's I think that's why everyone called back to them, because that was it was so simple and yet so incredibly powerful. Like I as someone who like farts around playing with the guitar, Ron Asheton is one of my favorites, just because he's kind of like Django Reinhardt, which at one level makes no sense whatsoever, and I'm sure jazz guitarists are.
I think I see where you're going with this. Yeah,
he's basically just fractalizing a melody. And if you listen to something like, I Want to Be Your Dog or No Fun, and he's just like, there's the simple melody, and he's just like blasting all up and down all over it. And James Williamson did something similar on Raw Power, but it's a little more polished, but also a lot more metallic. And
like Search and Destroy has an amazing guitar riff.
Yeah.
Just absolutely top notch.
Yeah, and Death Trip, like I could listen to that over and over and over again and not get tired of it. Just because that's like, as in concept of guitar fury, and if you like electric guitar, it's all about fury.
Whereas Luster Life a little closer to surf rock with its guitar.
But I mean, that was a solo album though. That wasn't.
That was a solo.
That wasn't the Stooges. That was his walking away from the Stooges.
Yeah.
But yeah, it's yeah, that as well. And if you're still alive, it's because you managed to get away from the hard drugs that were going to kill you. That's why Johnny
in the metal scene too.
Yeah. That's why John Lydon is still alive and Sid Vicious is not. Poor fellow.
Yeah, well, you gotta. I don't even know what to say about that one. John Lydon has become a little stodgy in his old age, but but he's British. He's British. That was bound to happen. You can't be British and age. If you're British and you age, you become stodgy. It's just how it works.
I mean, these people are all the same age as our parents.
Yeah.
like the Sex Pistols are literally the same age as my dad, and that's fine. So they're going to get old, and when you get old, you get old things. I mean, we're middle-aged now, and we're talking about the kids, the music these darn kids listen to today, and we just don't get it because we're not 14 anymore.
I mean,
we've heard a bunch of stuff, and we're not as easy to impress.
I get it. It's just soft as shit. That's all.
Yeah.
That's all I'm saying. I get it. It's just soft.
That's what your dad said about Nirvana, though, is what I'm saying.
My dad, I can't remember what his opinion on anything musical was. He had opinions. Music was not things he had opinions about.
No.
Though I do think that the Black Sabbath album I ended up with was it Neon Nights? Was his.
Mm-hmm. Nice.
Definitely the Hendrix albums I had were his. And I think my copy of Sgt. Pepper's was also his. So I could appreciate that. That is a strange thing. My parents, I could appreciate their music because their music wasn't soft bullshit. I mean, for the most part. The Beatles can vary. The Beatles
can vary.
Yeah.
Number nine. Yeah, that's ridiculous.
And I Am the Walrus. Now, I am the
That's
Walrus.
a good song.
I Am Being It. And that's a very good song. There are aspects of it that never made it out, like Alamander Custard coming out of Dead Dogs. What the fuck is even being said here?
That's the same thing we were talking about. It's that whole Little Richard nonsense lyrics thing. Like, that's not supposed to make sense. It's supposed to, like,
but it
disassociate your brain.
Banger. Yeah, but it is a banger.
Or like, you know, Cream, Tales of Brave Ulysses.
Yes. Yes.
This is the story of the Brave Ulysses.
Yeah. It's supposed to be diссociative.
That whole Cream album that track is off of originally.
I had Disraeli Gears.
It's really
I had a copy of that on vinyl. I don't know whatever happened to it, but I used to have a copy. It was my parents' copy.
Yeah, my folks used to play it, and I grew up listening to it. It was amazing.
Yeah.
Oh, your dad had an amazing reel-to-reel setup. That thing that still has it, if I recall properly.
He's actually replaced the machine a few times. I've taken him to places actually in town where they have like machines that the guys worked on and like refurbed.
Yeah, that's good.
Yeah, like his dad, an amazing collection of reel-to-reel music that he's got, and and I had never heard reel-to-reel until coming to his house. And his dad would play. Your dad has Zeppelin, a whole bunch of stuff.
Yeah, it was kind of a dead end format, but like he kept the player and like has a bunch of albums for it.
There's an appreciation for analog.
Oh, for sure, yeah.
I mean,
he's always had a turntable and just tons of records. Yeah.
If he's got an 8-track, then truly,
no, he doesn't.
Truly, he is the carrier of lost formats.
No. We do have a shit ton of cassette tapes, though.
Cassette tapes are niche and cool again. Like people are all about cassette tapes. All of a sudden, after vinyl got resurgence, and like you can buy stuff on Bandcamp that's all on cassette. And
I would not, because I remember the inevitable thing that your cassette's going to end up strewn all over the goddamn parking lot in some kind of weird fucking magnetic macrame. And never again should you be able to listen to your song properly again.
Yeah. Cassettes are for at home sometimes, and only if I don't have the album on like vinyl or CD.
Yeah, man. I'm not. Look, my problem with cassettes is simply that they are an inconvenient technology format that does not last very long and will definitely turn itself into friggin' spaghetti at a moment's notice and make you cry. I like not having to use like a pen or a pencil to repair my music listening.
Right on.
The struggle is real. Although I've still got mixtapes that I made like 20 years ago that are still there. A whole collection.
Must you share your secret shame? Yeah. Must you share?
I'm not ashamed. I am proud.
Well, you should be.
I am proud. I made those tapes. I'm currently doing that with my kids, actually. I'm like, we're making a mixtape off of my vinyl. And I'm letting them pick the songs, which is fun.
That's cool.
Yeah.
Yeah, that is cool, actually.
Yeah, letting your 9-year-old rock out to Pink Floyd for the first time.
Yeah.
It's a nice moment.
I mean, better that you have girls than boys, because if you had boys, they would just use that skill to attempt to woo, and the mixtape is never a good wooing method.
It's not. It's not. We all learned that the hard way.
The mixtape is a passive-aggressive wooing method.
You might as well write a sonnet.
A sonnet, at least, a little more honest, man. You know, your words.
Yeah.
I mean, well-written poetry will get you somewhere, but a mixtape...
The road to closure.
I mean, dude, like mixed CDs,
should be
oh, God. Changing the names so that everyone remains innocent. I just remember someone I know from Pittsburgh had given one of my friends, who he was totally into because she was filthy hot, a mixed CD, and I just kind of side-eyed him. I'm like, nah, done.
It's not gonna work.
This is done. This is the 2000s. This is not. You are going nowhere with that. Like that's just that's sad sack former DJ bullshit right there, man.
Did she ask you for this CD? No, do not give it to her.
Yeah, that's the step that you need to do. Like,
there's some critical analysis in there.
You give a mixed CD to someone you're already dating. It's like something you do to seal like the deal. Like, and it's an introductory thing. Like, you don't try to get someone with a mixed CD.
When you're hanging out with your girl and you listen to some
here's my feelings in musical format.
These songs make me think of you.
This is what I listen to when I drive by your house to see if you're home.
These are the songs that
not creepy at all there. Yeah.
No.
These are the songs I play when I'm sadly pulling my pud on my own.
Womp womp.
Your trombone is very sad now.
Yes.
Oh,
shall we wrap it up there?
I think we have to. That's the conclusion. That's the conclusion. All right, this has been shallow and pedantic, not defining what punk is because it's completely indefinable. Haha. There are no rules, and that's the rule, man. I'm Andrew.
Surprise. I'm Mike.
I'm Kieran.
All right, and thank y'all for stopping by. We'll catch you next time.